Hello folk, and welcome to my little class, where we learn that it's not enough to know what, but it's also important to understand how and why. I will be obnoxious talking about words, because words form the way we perceive information. And I know some people would like to argue with that. So to demonstrate, please watch this little bit of a hand-wringing video.
You could see one way of interpreting this. Trump says that he will sign executive order blocking state AI regulations despite safety fears. And you could see a version of this from the right. Trump to issue one rule book AI executive order after Congress fails to curb bad actor states. So it's the fault of Congress here.
In this video, I combined recordings from different days and months. So apologies in advance to your hearing and to your patience. 80-20 rule is the idea that 80% of women compete for 20% of men, and the rest of the men are basically non-existent. OkCupid study that I want to talk about is often considered as the source that confirms this idea. I've read it and I have a lot of comments about it. Before we start looking at it, I just want to say what the goal for making this video is. All I want is to look at the information presented together with you, line by line, to see what it says, how it can be interpreted, and how reliable this information is. I'm not going to tell what I personally believe. I just want you to look at the text with me. I will also not look at the whole article because the second part of the article of this post talks about reply rates on the website, and it is something I haven't seen being referenced, so I don't find it as important to discuss. Plus, it would just be way too long and boring. So we're finished with appetizers. Let's get to the main course. OkCupid is one quite old dating website. The study I'm going to reference is called Your Looks and Your Inbox. It was posted in 2009 by Christian Rudder, one of the founders of OkCupid. First of all, let's look at the metadata, which is everything that surrounds the information. What I mean by that is that this so-called study is just a blog post on the OkCupid blog. This post was made by OkCupid's co-founder Christian Rudder. It was published on, again, 2009, and it is part of OkCupid's team research of their dating website. So, just like I said, let's start going line by line. This week, we will confront an unfortunate truth of online dating. No matter how much time you spend polishing your profile, honing your IM banter, and perfecting your message introductions, it's your picture that matters the most. We're off to a great start. What do you notice about this introduction that is special? An unfortunate truth, it says. We're starting with a value judgment. We've barely read a word, but we already get a perspective and lens handed to us through which we need to look at the information we will receive. First of all, we should believe it, since it is truth. Second, we should be upset about it, because it's unfortunate. Please pay attention to how he uses your picture. The wording is important. We're going to look at how your photos affect both the messages you get and how successful your own outgoing messages are. So, as I said before, we're only going to look at the first part. We all know that beautiful people are more successful daters, but let's quantify by exactly how much. To illustrate the exact spectrum we're talking about here and to put some human faces on our discussion, I want to introduce a few photos of real OkCupid users. So we have 4 photos of 4 users for men and the same for women. The author has the dignity to not post the bottom rated people. Let's see what else Chris has to say about the users. Funnily enough, I had to write a dozen beautiful female users before anyone would ever get back to me. Life imitates blog. We'll start with the simple line chart. The information I will present in this post is not normalized because, as we'll see, it's interesting how men and women evaluate looks differently. Our chart shows that men have rated women on a scale from 0 to 5. The curve is symmetric and surprisingly charitable. A woman is as likely to be considered extremely ugly as extremely beautiful, and the majority of women have been rated about medium. The chart looks normalized, even though it's just the unfiltered opinion of our male users. Given the popular wisdom that Hollywood, the internet, and Photoshop have created unrealistic expectations of how a woman should look, I found the firmness and, realism of this grey are kind of heartening. Now let's look at his wording. He says, the curve is surprisingly charitable, even though he also says it's fair. So while he says that it is fair, so the way it should be, he also, on the other hand, gives it a positive rating, which you are not supposed to do. It's another way of directing your interpretation of the data. You are supposed to look at this graph and, together with the author, feel happy about how men perceive women's attractiveness. But before we move forward, let's think about information that we haven't been told. First of all, how many participants are in the study? Can you guess? I can't, because we don't have this information. It's not presented anywhere, which obviously doesn't even allow us to judge how accurate it can be. It can be 5 people, or maybe 10, or it can be 1 million. This is the most important thing that we are missing. The next one. Now remember how I told you to pay attention to what he said? It's your picture that matters the most. Let's compare with the wording here. Our chat shows how men have rated women. What was asked? to be rated. As we can see here, it says attractiveness. Here it says it's about beauty or it's about your picture. The thing is, attractive doesn't always mean beautiful. And given that we don't know if the profiles were rated as a whole or just by pictures, we don't know questions, we basically do not know what they were actually rating. We also don't know how many pictures were in these profiles. What was the process of evaluation? Did they see the first picture, just one picture? Did they see many pictures? Did they see the rest of profiles? At which point were they given the rating? When they were given the rating, did they say specifically rate the pictures, rate the attractiveness of the person? Basically, we actually don't know anything. The original idea was that while women compete for the top 20% of men don't get to be as choosy, which is something the incel community will always remind you about. Here we can see that they absolutely get to be choosy, because here we see male messaging and female attractiveness compared to male messaging and female attractiveness graph. Someone who is very attractive gets nearly 5 times as many messages as a typical woman, and 28 times as many messages as a woman at the low end of the curve. As we can see, it's even highlighted that 2/3 of male messages go to the top 1/3 of women. Here the author says, so basically, guys are fighting each other 2-for-1 for the absolute best rated females, while plenty of potentially charming, even cute girls go unwritten. Now, for the female equivalent, we get both messaging and male attractiveness. Women rate an incredible 80% of guys as worse looking than medium, very harsh. On the other hand, when it comes to actual messaging, women shift their expectations only just slightly ahead of the curve, which is a healthier pattern than guys pursuing the all but unattainable. But when the basic ratings go so out of whack, the two curves together suggest some strange possibilities for the female thought process, the most salient of which is that the average-looking woman has convinced herself that the vast majority of males aren't good enough for her. But she then goes right out and messages them anyway. Now, this isn't just manipulating information. This is straight up bullshitting. Who says average woman thinks that these men are not good enough for her? Maybe she thinks she is also below average. How about that? she might as well think that she is still below their league, even if they're below average. Yet Christian here somehow convinced herself that to rate someone below medium, you have to think you're better than them. Interesting, but wrong. No. Cool, right? You see how uncharitable, intentionally uncharitable women are presented here. Just to illustrate that women are operating on a very different scale. Here are just a few of the many guys we hear in the office think are totally decent looking, but that women have rated in their occult way as significantly less attractive than so-called medium. And I want to remind you that in the beginning he told us, no, I won't show you the bottom of the curve. That's not quite nice to people. But now that he wants to drive the point that they in the office are not as judgy as those occult thinking women, he's ready to present the bottom of the curve. Females of OkCupid. We site founders say to you, ouch! Paradoxically, it seems it's women, not men, who have unrealistic standard for the average member of the opposite sex. Interesting, since they said at the beginning they are not going to show the bottom of the curve, and I don't think at least some of them are definitely not near the bottom. Probably none of them are near the bottom, but they are below the median. Why are you showing them if you told you wouldn't be? Females of OkCupid. We site founders say to you, ouch! Paradoxically, it seems that it's women, not men, who have unrealistic standards for the average member of the opposite sex. Finally, I just want to combine the two charts to emphasize how much fuller the inboxes of good-looking people get. I have scaled the graph to show multiples of messages sent to the lowest rated people. For instance, the most attractive guys get 11 times the messages the lowest rated do. The medium rated get about 4 times as much. I have to remind that 0 times any number is still 0. So the lowest rated guys still get messages. This graph also dramatically illustrates just how much more important a woman's looks are than a guy's. So Chris, our dear Chris, doesn't want to say it outright, but we can see that the most attractive women get 25 times as many messages as the least attractive women get. Meanwhile, as he was ready to state, the most attractive guys get 11 times as many messages as the lowest rated do. So that's quite a curve. And with this, we come to the conclusion of this first part of the article, the one that I wanted to discuss. And funnily enough, we only get one sentence for the conclusion, for something that can be considered the most important part of the whole blog post. So what we can conclude about this quote-unquote study? It doesn't disclose its methodology, arguably the most important part, the part that helps us judge the information presented and the study. The author goes out of his way to first instill the feeling of doom into you. If you're ugly, you have almost no hope. This is the idea he wants you to believe in. And second, he intentionally paints women in a bad light. He goes out of his way to do so. Meanwhile, the conclusion, that is, I remind you, this graph also dramatically illustrates just how much more important a woman's looks are than a guy's. This is one sentence that you can just skim over, since it's right below the picture. So what can you take away from this video? Please check your sources. Be critical and don't build your worldview on the shaky ground of false premises. That's it. Thank you for sticking around. Like, subscribe, and know it will get better. Mwah. Finally, I just want to combine the two charts. Finally, I just want to combine the two charts. I just want to combine the two charts. I can't speak.